Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Wayne St. Amand, Chief Marketing Officer at Quantified, and I'm really glad and happy that you're joining us for today's session. As Vanessa mentioned, our session is called From Roleplay to Revenue, Operationalizing Real-World Sales Readiness. I'm especially excited to have Rich Kettley with us. Rich is Vice President of Marketing and Training at WestPac Wealth Partners. Rich brings a practical operator's perspective on what it takes to prepare customer-facing teams for the conversations that matter most and how that challenge changes as an organization grows. And that's what we're really focused on in this conversation today is that real-world practitioner's view of how to make this all work. So one of the things that we learned from our early conversations in prep for this webinar with Rich is that Westpac built its reputation on a high-touch approach to advisor development through shadowing, live role play, and in-person workshops. But like many growing organizations, Westpac reached a point where traditional coaching methods became harder to scale consistently. Today's conversation is really about what happens next, right? How Westpac introduced AI-powered role play, quantified, to create a more repeatable, realistic, and measurable way to help advisors practice critical client conversations. What I'm looking forward to most, as I mentioned before, is that this is going to be a very practical discussion. This is not about theory or hype. It's what actually looks like to modernize sales readiness in the real world, how to balance realism with scale, how to help reps show up more prepared, and how to free up leaders to spend more time in their highest value activities. Rich, are you excited for this?
Oh yeah, I'm ready.
All
Let's
right.
roll.
Thanks so much for being here. And obviously, let's get started.
Sounds
Um,
good.
so I think before we get into, this the story of Westpac and your journey, would it be helpful if you could give everyone just a quick sense of kind of who you are and what Westpac Wealth Partners is all about?
Yeah. So personal side, grew up in Orange County, Southern California. Grew up with six sisters, no brothers. And today I have six children. And that's the personal side. I'm involved with outdoor activities, Boy Scouts, other things like that, and community and church and so forth. Professional side, I've been in financial services for quite some time. I got started back in 1994 is when I first went to my first financial conference and so forth. Worked in this space for quite a few years, worked in a family business where I eventually sold it. At that point, I moved to one other company and then landed here at Westpac and I've been here for about 13 years. Westpac started back in 2007 with just four advisors, so we're a relatively young firm in that regard. But we started back then in Hawaii and expanded here to the mainland, and we have offices across the nation. I would say, one of my personal things that I think is pretty awesome about Westpac is number one is the people that we serve. We work with executives, medical professionals. We work with professional athletes, and one area that I really like is business owners because I'm tied to that, having worked in a family business and so forth and helping people in the spaces of, income shifting, tax mitigation, uh, growing and protecting their wealth. And, along the way, the second thing I'm pretty happy about or pleased with is that we've received a lot of recognition in the industry. And it's not just if you've worked with people in marketing, there's some of the stuff where you can do pay to play, where you can pay to get a badge or something like that. But the stuff that we've got it's legitimate. We're part of the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies in the nation, which is a very difficult achievement to obtain multiple years in a row. And then we've also been recognized by Fortune as the number one best mid-sized company to work
Mm.
for across the nation. And that's another really nice accomplishment. There's several others, but those are a couple of the fun ones.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, it speaks to your growth. I have it in my notes that at some point you went from 80 to more than 350 people.
Yep.
Growth is hard. Growth is incredibly challenging, and one of the hardest things about growth is maintaining what got you there,
Oh
right?
yeah, for real.
Hanging on to the core principles, all of the things that you operated with such excellence when you were a smaller entity gets harder and harder to do as you scale, and especially in those customer facing roles, right? Those advisors.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Like it's one of those concepts. There's a quote out there, and I might get it a little bit wrong, but the quote is, and it applies to like countries and so forth, but I feel like it applies to a business where you have your core people, you have your culture, the stuff, as they say, culture eats strategy for breakfast and all that stuff. Like culture
Yep.
is so important. And the quote says that immigration without assimilation is a form of it. Essentially, it's invasion. And so if you
Mm,
think about that as a company, when you grow, you have people coming in, like an immigration. There's people that are joining in. And if they do not assimilate to your standard operating procedures, your systems, and everything else, if they don't assimilate to that, it's going to change the culture of the company. Now, in some cases, that's a great thing. You have mergers of companies, and it's fantastic. With us, we're already in the number one spot. It's very important for us to make sure that new people come in, that they assimilate to the way that we run the business.
yeah, perfect segue to kind of the next question is, how do you think about advisor development and at Westpac, and what was the core challenge you were trying to solve? Based on your prior response, I can think about, what one of the responses might be, but foundationally be interested in those points.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, right? So you've got with us with 300 plus 350 plus advisors, I've got brand new reps who are coming on board who don't know anything about finance. And I've got my experienced advisors. And how can I get them all to continue to level up to become the best version of themselves? And it's a difficult thing. Do I take these top advisors that their hourly rate is extremely high, have them take time to spend time with the newer advisors? Well, that's part of it. That is something what we do. And but I think back to I want these folks to be able to level up. And there's a thing in psychology where it talks about when you first learn about, well, I grew up in the 80s, all right? And in the 80s, I wanted to be like Mike. I got myself a pair of Air Jordans, and everybody wanted to be like Mike. And when I first saw Michael Jordan do some of the moves that he did on the basketball court, I moved in a stage of being unconsciously incompetent to suddenly I was now consciously incompetent.
Mm,
I saw him do those things. I'm like, oh, I can't do that. The goal is that we have advisors coming on board in a similar state where they are unconsciously incompetent. Then we show them how to do it. And now they move from unconsciously incompetent. So now they understand that they're incompetent. I need them to move to a stage where they are eventually consciously consciously competent to eventually be like Michael Jordan or be like Mike, where they can be unconsciously competent. And
mm,
that's the goal. So how do you get these people to do that? A lot of that has to do with repetition. Michael Jordan did not make every free throw from the very beginning. He didn't do it at the end, but you keep practice, you do repetition, you get more at bats or swings or shots or whatever, and eventually you become better.
yeah, yeah, no. And tell me a little bit about how you arrived at AI role play as a way to kind of maintain these cultural imperatives that you have with your advisors. You talked about the importance of practice and repetition and things like that, but tell me about your journey, a little bit about the problem that you were facing and then kind of how you arrived at a general solution space.
Yeah, so there's a few things a few things that as I look back on it, it started off where I can't pay, I can't have my top advisors helping the new advisors all day long because then they're not performing and doing what they need to be doing. So how can I fix that? And so we take the language from the top advisors, we clean it up, basically put it into scripts, hand it over to the FRs and say, practice it. Our
Mm,
next hurdle was they're not practicing it.
mm,
Right. And so then, okay, well, now what? So then we start teaching them, we want you to record it to your cell phone as a voice memo and practice it that way. And then listen to it while you're driving around town. And let's try that. Um, we started having them recording themselves and so forth. But then we started running into this new problem where they get the script down and there's kind of a difference with like scripts are good for a baseline, but they're not good for the real world. They work in the vacuum and in role play when you're both doing, but it's kind of more like I used to act. I was in theater as a kid and up in LA and Hollywood. And in there when I was on a sitcom, I got the different cameras and they will come and they will say to you, okay, Rich, here's your line. And then Wayne, here's your line. And then Rich, here's your line. And you both know your lines. And then when you don't do your line, suddenly I'm like, you got it wrong. And then you have to say line and like, oh yeah. And like it doesn't work unless everybody knows their lines. The reality is the real world as an advisor or a sales rep or whatever you are, you know your lines. The other person doesn't know the lines. So
Mm,
it's not a script like you would have in Hollywood. It's more like improv. Kind of like what we're doing here. Like you and I
sure.
have an idea of what we're going to talk about, but the reality is you're sitting here going, okay, when is Rich slowing down? When do I jump in and add some color commentary? It's the same thing, and that's the real world. And so how do I
Yes.
get my reps to get to that stage? Obviously, we're all familiar with this new thing called AI. I say that facetiously, like it's not that new, but it's relatively new. And
Sure.
we started playing with it. We started doing research, looking at different companies and different ones that were implementing it. And after quite a bit of research and introductions and testing out with a few of them, we wound up with Quantified.
And what did your initial your pilot look like? What were some of your goals? What's your intent behind it? Obviously, you want to prove the concept, but any kind of color you can add around that?
Yeah, yeah. There's a thing in psychology, it's called behavior momentum. It works in sales and everything else. You're looking for some basic momentum, right? How do you keep leveling up? It's similar to the Socratic method of selling, right? I just want to keep
Mm,
going little sales and so forth. And so with me, I'm trying to get some behavior momentum with my advisors. How am I going to do that? With 300 advisors, there's not a chance I'm going to be able to control all 300 plus and getting them to do this. I need a small with it, do a smaller group and so forth, a little more controlled group. Also, to be cost prohibitive for us to say, hey, let everybody do it. But it's just simply not, it's hurting cats in that regard. So we took ourselves a smaller group and we did a test pilot, but coming back from my software days, developing software, we said, okay, well, let's do a test pilot. Let's pay for and relatively, and we can talk more about this later, that we paid a certain amount. At first it felt like a lot, but really as I looked at it, it was a nominal fee to have these 10 reps try it out and say, okay, here's your commitment. You're going to jump into this. You're going to start doing these different role plays. And we had weekly calls with them to make sure it was working right and make sure that they were that they were implementing it. And so that we can kind of keep our finger on the pulse and make some adjustments along the way, which was awesome. It allowed us to make some quick critiques and quick adjustments to make the next course or next role play better and better.
Was there any kind of initial awkwardness in the test? People interacting with the AI?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, of course, like I think most people on the call here, we've all been there. Like, remember when COVID started? And you're like you'd get on a phone call with someone and you jump on it and you're like, I'm not turning on my camera, like I don't want someone to see it. That was the beginning of code. Well, this is obviously way past that. Here I am in my home office. I've got kids out, somewhere in the house right now. They're on spring break right now, and if I hear them making some noise or popped in a door, then I jokingly call that a celebrity guest appearance, and we move on. Life has changed. It was awkward at first. We get used to it. And it's the same thing with the AI that people talked about. Like, it's kind of weird. I don't know. But after a couple times, just like with this, they got used to it and it actually had some tremendous impact on some of these people.
Now, as you were kind of considering the concept of AI role play and kind of thinking through the benefits of doing this, did you ever have a moment where you felt like organizationally, you wanted to use something generic or, build this yourself, or was there some benefit to kind of going with a vendor that sort of had built this in a prepackaged way for a team like yours?
Yeah. So we did try some of the out of the box stuff that's just not free, but like very, very cheap. And
Mm,
you can have a conversation with most of the AI tools that are out there and just start talking with it. The problem is that they aren't coming back to you um, in a real training situation where they can make
mm,
it as realistic as you want. They're grabbing all the data throughout the entire interwebs and the wifis and the Wi-Fi's, and I'm joking, but all that stuff, and they're giving you everything. I don't want it to be that way because I'm trying to
yeah.
protect my culture
Yeah.
and our perspective on how planning and how everything else should be done. And so we looked at some of those other ones, and there's a great book out there for those of you listening. If you're looking for a fantastic book out there, it's by Dr. Benjamin Hardy, and it's called Who, Not How.
Mm,
And the concept is this, is that frequently in life, if I say to you, hey, you got to do this, the first thought is, how am I going to do that? That's what we do. That's what human beings do. Like, how am I going to do that? And his in the book, he walks through that process that it's not about how, it's about who. We
mm,
will all go so much more further in life. Like the saying says, you want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far, go together. I
yeah.
would argue that if you want to go faster, farther, faster, you go together. Because eventually you get to the point, and it happened with this. We hired you. That's the who, not the how am I going to do this. Hired the who. You come to the table with a load of experience and understanding about how this is supposed to be done. You're coaching us. We're telling you what we're trying to accomplish. We implement it. It was implemented much faster than we ever could have done on our own, and
Mm.
it's way more powerful and way more impactful for the advisors.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I want to just pause here for a moment and remind the audience that they can ask questions whenever those questions pop into their heads. Just use your Zoom webinar interface, throw that question or questions our way. We do have a question and answer session at the end where we'll endeavor to answer as many of your questions as time allows. But just a reminder, like, don't wait. If you've got something that you're curious about, type that in as you think of it, okay? So that you don't forget by the
That's
time
good commercial. I
we
like
get to
that.
the
That's good.
end.
Yes.
Um,
Station pausing for station identification here.
e-
And yes.
exactly, exactly. We want to get to your questions ultimately because, in this conversation, we most definitely won't have thought of any of everything, right, that we could cover, and want to make sure that we're addressing the things that are top of mind for you, as we go. Okay, Rich, back to it. So this is obviously a big step, right? Going from what you might think of as traditional human-based training, human-based advisor certification on the pitches, the conversation, the style of interaction that you want to have, um, to something that is AI driven, right? And
Mhm.
there are a lot of benefits, obviously, to making something AI driven. The first one I think is scale, and objectivity, right? Anytime you
Mhm.
get humans involved, humans training other humans, it's not entirely objective. You don't have the same rubric applied to
Yep.
every single person who's going through that training and going through that practice and going through that certification. And machines do that beautifully well, right? They
Yeah.
are totally objective, applying exactly the same rubric to everyone and holding everyone to exactly the same high standard that you want to have, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, I am curious from a story perspective. Did you see any kind of interesting patterns play out with reps? I'm sorry. Um,
I think I know
is
where
there,
you're going with this.
yeah, is there a story from the pilot so far that sort of said, this is clicking, right? This is
Yeah.
working. People are getting over that initial awkwardness of, speaking to a machine,
Yeah.
um, that's simulating a human, right? And really are able to kind of focus on how they're practicing. Because otherwise, what are they doing? They're practicing in the mirror. They're talking to a wall,
Hmm.
right? They're talking into their phone or whatever.
Yeah.
But um, you know, I'm just curious, are there any stories so far from the pilot that sort of stand out to you as, hey, this is clicking, this is working, this is starting to achieve what we want it to achieve?
Yeah, so two thoughts and then right into that. Number one, you mentioned the word pitch in conversations.
Mm,
We've removed the word pitch from
mm,
our language. And the reasoning is that we feel like a pitch is me standing in front of the mirror and we just showing up and throwing up all the words I can and hope
yeah.
and pray that the person says, yes, I'm going to buy. And I'll use all kinds of sales strategies and techniques to try to trick them into purchasing. Um, that's not how we work, right? It's more about a conversation. And
Mm,
a pitch is more what we were doing a while ago when I get them to record the language. And it's not to say that they don't need to understand the language because words matter, but it's there's so much more to communication. There's body language, there's tone and everything else. And I do love how the system is able to pick up uh, on this information that the advisor is doing, and it does. It keeps it so it's binary, and it keeps it very much so. Yeah, binary is probably the easiest word for me to put there. Now back to like, okay, so what kind of impact did this have on some of the advisors? And the one story that probably stands out the most to me is that when we have the advisors come on board, we don't just sit there and say to them, hey, go out there and memorize these scripts and go and just start talking to everybody. We have them develop a comprehensive business plan. And part of any business plan, when you've got, well, who are the key people? Who are the systems? What are the products? Um, who's my board of directors? But one of those items is what is my marketing going to look like? What's my marketing plan? And so we have them go ahead and put together a marketing plan and they need to do market research. You need to go out to your network of people that you know and start doing market research about which different associations you can get involved with, which potential COIs, centers of influence you might be working with. So you can develop how am I going to get people in the door? Because I don't care if you have the absolute best mousetrap known to mankind. If you don't have a way for mankind to find out about it, you will go out of business. And having started some of my own businesses and failed, that is the number one issue that I dealt with is how do I get this in front of more people to see it? So we had them working on this market research plan. I had one of my FRs, which is short for financial rep. Sorry if I use the acronyms, but one of my representatives, he he didn't want to do the market research. He's like, I'm old, 40-ish or something like that. I'm old. I've been around the block. I know what I'm doing. And he understood a lot of the concepts that we do but not really, not to the same level. And we have a proprietary system that we've developed to help them really build an incredible marketing plan. And he just wasn't willing to make the phone calls to do the research. And
mm,
it got to the point where he like one of my team members was talking with him and he said, he says to one of my gals on my team, he says, she asked him, how's your research questions project going? And he says, if another person asks me to do this again, I'm going to lose my mind.
mm,
And she's like, whoa, like, okay, I'll let it go. And why? And he's like, Rich has asked me about it, so and so and so and so. He's like, I'm not doing it. Okay. So at that point, I'm like, I'm letting this go. I'm not going to get in there. Like, I can't want your success more than you want it. Cool. You're going to go ahead and try to do it your way. It's not how we make the Big Mac here, but okay. If you want to put ketchup on your Big Mac, go right ahead. It's not, it's not how it's done. Whatever. But he's in the role play, and part of the role play system was he was supposed to role play the research questionnaire surveys that we do.
mm,
And he goes ahead and he did it because it's part of the check marks. He's fairly binary in that regard, and he marked it off. He came back later on and he had his forgive the phrase, but his come to Jesus where he had realized,
mhm,
oh my gosh, I was wrong. And for
mm,
some reason, like, and we all get this, right? Everybody learns differently. You have auditory, kinesthetic, you have all these different ways that people learn. For him, and I've seen this a lot, is that it's one thing to read the words on the screen. It's another thing to think about the words. But really, when you start saying the words and doing it, it turns to a completely different experience. That's why, for example, I can read about how to change my oil and I can even watch a YouTube video on how to change my oil. But until I actually change my oil, I don't understand. And it was
mm,
the same thing. He just was not understanding. And as soon as he went through the role play, he came back and said, this is awesome. I don't know what I was thinking. Um, I missed the mark. I'm going to start making these calls and start doing this having these market research conversations, not pitches, right? Conversations with these people. Long
So, I
story.
mean,
Sorry, I'm a little
no,
long-winded
no, no,
sometimes, but
no.
it was
I
interesting.
mean, it's good. It's this kind of color, that is really like it, we love to hear it at Quantified, but it's also really interesting for the audience because we're always interested in like what are the real world barriers to success when you turn a solution like this on, right?
Yeah.
And you make headway with it, there is the human factor, right? Where, you have to have your commercial reps sit down in front of their screen and interact, with a simulated human. And what I heard from you is that it's the conversational aspect that is really powerful, right? It is not just the quote unquote pitch, the word that you're not using anymore. It's not just the conversation, it's not just a pitch, which is not a conversation. It is the two-way expression of communication that you're having with the simulated human, with the AI, that is programmed to act like your customer, to ask the conversations, to have the facial expressions, etc. Did that really make a difference for your reps as they're experiencing it? And is it making a difference? Really, kind of that simulated interaction, the communication and conversation.
It's huge, right?
Mm,
Because think about this, right? I speak quite a bit. If I'm going to speak at an event and I've got one coming up and I say, okay, I've written out what I want to talk about. And I'm like, let me practice it really quickly. And I pull up my paper and I start reading it. This, welcome everybody, blah, 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 blah. And then my kid knocks on the door. It turns into like, what? And we get distracted. So my solution personally, what I have done is that when I'm practicing a presentation or something I'm going to do, I take out my phone, I hit record because now I got a timer going and it forces me to lock into that like Rich, pretend like this is live and it's actually happening.
mm,
That's kind of the same thing that I'm dealing with the reps is that by creating this environment where they are forced to role play with it, with the AI, it feels more real, it feels like a human, they're more likely to work on the script and go from beginning to end and push their way through and get it done. And one of the really cool things that's actually even happened with it as well is that we had someone say, well, occasionally, like I would say something to the AI and it paused for 2 seconds before it responded to me. And, which we get, right? Hey, that's AI. It's got to think for a second. But here's the thing is that as I was sitting there listening to it, I was like, you know what? I coached one of my top advisors several years ago. When he was dealing with Zoom and stuff like that, and he said, "I'm talking with people, and you know how it's sometimes like I'm talking and then you're talking, like, oh, wait, no, you go, wait, no, you go. It's kind of that dance thing, like who's going first, like type of a deal." And he talked about, he says it's creating some really awkward moments on the phone on these
mm,
Zoom meetings. And so, as
mm,
we were walking through, I've got a lot of background in psychology and everything and so forth. And I said, prime the meeting, set it up from the beginning. Say, hey, I know we're on Zoom. I know sometimes there's a little bit of lag in internet and so forth that we might be over talking. Totally normal. I'm okay with it. Are you okay with it? And suddenly anxiety levels go down. Oh, that's okay. Not a big deal. Hey, I'm calling from my home office. So if something just lowers the expectations of everybody. And I shared with them, I'm like, that's kind of normal in this world. Like that stuff happens where, you might be talking with the AI and a person, you ask them a question, they kind of sit there and they think for a second because they don't know the answer. That's okay. Be patient. And
mm.
so it's actually turned out to be a good thing.
Now, as you've been using AI to prep your advisors, are you running them through multiple scenarios? Have you got kind of one primary scenario, or what are you working on in that regard?
Okay. So that's a really good one. So those of you who've checked out, I know there's two of you on this call that checked out. Everybody else is locked in, but there's two of you who've checked out and started answering text messages or emails. Listen to this one. This one's good, right? I love the concept that the smart man or woman learns from his own mistakes. The fool does not, but it's the wise man or woman who learns from the mistakes of others, right?
Mm.
And so so coming back to repeat your question one more time because I just as I wanted to say that I'm going to come back into it. You said,
Yeah, no, it's about multiple scenarios, right?
okay, I'm
Like,
with you now.
there,
Okay,
yeah,
I'm there.
okay.
I'm there. Okay, so our first round that we did on this, we released each role play 1 week at a time. Here's your first role play. And then we met and talked about it. And we said, okay, we're launching your next role play for this next upcoming week. And then here's your next one. And then came be the next one. And then here's the next one. And we did it. And we had incredible feedback. This was done back in November, December, right around there. And then we finished the group, the pilot, and we said, okay, let's put in another group. So this happened. And me, I'm a little bit of a stronger personality at times. When I'm not stressed out, I'm that yellow personality. I love to have fun and great time. And then when the pressure comes, a dominant red personality, and I get crap done. Um, People don't like that. My wife doesn't like that version of me. But but so I'm sitting there going, well, hey, it's December 23rd. Let's launch it and let's give it to them all and give them the 2 weeks that they have over Christmas break, the New Year, and so forth. Hey, they can work on these over the next 2 weeks. We launched it. We made it available to them. Had a kickoff meeting. 2 weeks later, nothing. Now,
Mm.
part of the problem is we did it over the holidays, but I thought, well, maybe they'll work on it over the holidays and have fun with it. Nope, didn't do that. But the other problem was is that we didn't allow for there's this thing in psychology, it's called trans-theoretical model of change, of how do you get people to change? And it's again, it comes back to behavioral momentum and everything like that. And the reality is that I didn't create that. And because I gave it all to them, hoping that they would binge watch it like we do on Netflix, it didn't work. What I really need to do is similar to how I think Wednesday did it this way, but a lot of Netflix and other places do it now where they will only give you one episode per week to force you to lock in, watch it 1 week, and then get excited to the next one and the next one. So yeah, I'm moving more towards the Netflix slow release model, and that's the direction we started going now. Is that we have, hey, do this, 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 and we release each one at a time to them.
Oh, that's a really good
Hard lesson to
Yeah, no,
learn.
it's a really good insight. At the end of the day, the customers, if you will, are the team, and the team is made up of humans, and you have to learn from what works in your in your particular organization. So I am curious about changes in productivity. So when we when we think about traditional training, certification, practice, preparedness of any sort to have those good conversations, you typically have to take time out during the business day, which takes
Hmm.
away from time that your advisors can be spending face to face or Zoom to Zoom with their buyers, their customers, etc. Right?
Yep.
Um, has there been any perceived benefit from the fact that their role play for preparedness for training can happen at any point in time, not during the business day? You seen any benefit yet to that idea?
No, yeah, and we've got an interesting culture here along those lines. We preach a 40-week work year. We teach our advisors to work 40 weeks. The other 12 weeks are done for vacation, holidays. We call workcations, conferences, etc. Um, but that means that you've got to be really locked in, really working hard for those 40 weeks of the year. And, I think it was Zig Ziglar, one of those guys said, it's
Mm,
40 hours a week to survive, and it's the 40 plus is where you start to thrive. So we've got a lot of people here that they're driven and they want to perform at high levels and so forth. And they understand that, there's hours of the day which are much more valuable, being to be working with clients and so forth. And being able for them to do this in the evenings, that dramatically helped. And I'm going to say something here that we all know. We all know this is that deadlines get stuff done. And
mm,
we saw it. Like you've got to have it, inspect what you expect. You have to have some level of accountability. Someone has to be tracking the data and following up with people and saying what's going on. And so what we found that worked best is that we would have a call. I I think I've handed a lot of this over to my team who's implementing it now, but I think it was Thursday, no, it might have been Friday morning. It was either Thursday or Friday. But anyway, it was at towards the end of the week, we'd have this call, we would all jump on, and then basically the call was let's review what went right, what went wrong, how are your numbers looking, and it's got an awesome dashboard to talk about. how you're doing with all of it. And then we say, okay, now we're releasing the next version. And so I think accountability is important. Tracking it is very important, and the fact that they could have that deadline. A significant number of the people were doing it Thursday night. I think it was Friday that we had it, but they were doing it the night before. Quite a few of them did it the night before, which
Yeah.
is okay. That's what I
Yeah.
want them doing.
Well, I mean, the point is that yes, you've created structure, right? And like a performance envelope you want them to fit into, but they also have the flexibility to do it at a time that works for them within that performance envelope, which is pretty powerful. It's a benefit. It's a
Well,
great
what's
benefit to your employees.
it's 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 huge. And what's even more powerful for me is that back to when I used to say record it, guess how many times they're recording it on their cell phone? Once.
Mm,
The data came back and showed us that while they're doing the role play, they did it multiple times
mm.
because they kept trying to get better and higher scores. And so they're like, oh, I didn't do so good on that one. Let me try it again. And let me try it again. And so there's, again, partially because of the culture we have and the type of people we're hiring where people want that. But it's a little bit of the gamification of the system where like you get points and people we want the gold stars. Uh, they're working for them.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's fantastic. So, Rich, I have two more questions for you, or kind of areas of questions, and then after that, we will start to transition into the Q&A
Okay.
from the audience members. Um, okay, so I'm curious about kind of leadership perception or leadership benefits. Like as you
Mhm.
took this journey, right? You obviously had to convince someone higher up that this was a good thing to do.
Yeah.
And then obviously they said, "Hey, yes, let's bring this and try this, right? Let's
Yeah.
experiment with this." And now you've been into it for a little while. I'm curious about that journey from this is an idea that I want to have happen to, how did you make that happen? How did you make that
Yeah.
argument successfully? And then since this has been in place, are there any other aspects of leadership perception that you want to talk about since getting the agreement?
Yeah. So I think, and I saw someone drop this in the chat about, what's the investment
Mm,
on this, and I think it ties a little bit. I can't. You have to call quantify to what your pricing would be. I mean, it's by numbers of people and so forth. But I can give you some high level concepts around this, and also a little more specifics of how it worked for me. And that is, too often in life, people say, "What is this going to cost?" Our language is different here. We don't talk about the cost. If we actually are talking about the dollars, we are talking about the outlay of cash, right? Because there's an outlay of cash to purchase something. But if I were to say to you, I've got this widget and it costs you $1,000 to buy, and I show up at your doorstep, and Wayne, would you want to buy this widget here that costs $1,000 and $1,000 a day for this widget? You'd be like, no, walk away. But then if I leave and I come back and say, I'm a horrific sales rep. I didn't do a very good job of sharing that with you. It costs you $1,000 a day to have this, but you put it on your floor in your house, and it spits out $1,500 a day in cash. Suddenly, it's not a cost. That's an investment, right? And so it still requires that same outlay of cash of the $1,000 a day, but it's spitting out an additional $500. That's common business. That's common, we get that. So as we're looking at the cost or the outlay of cash to purchase this product, it's not cheap, right? It, it's not who, it's not how, it's who.
mm,
And I'm paying for the who, but the
mm,
who's going to get me faster to where I want to be. So then the next question is, well, as I started looking at it, I said, well, right now I have these top advisors, and I'm just going to use some very easy round numbers just so it's easier for us to understand. But if the product costs me $1,000 a month or $1,000 a year, I don't care. We'll just say it's $1,000, and I've got a top producer that his hourly rate is $100 an hour. If this product can give him 10 hours back on his schedule and in his life, I'm at break even. If it can give him more than the 10 hours, it's like the widget example I gave you. It's positive for us. And for us, I started looking at the numbers and looking at the amount of hours that our top advisors and myself included are spending coaching these brand new FRs, financial reps. We're spending a lot more money than what we're paying for this. And there's all the additional benefits of that come with it. Now, here's the catch to it. The AI does not get the person completely to 100%, but any of us who've ever used AI, whether it's, Chat, Gemini, Grok, whatever it is that you're using, it doesn't get you to 100%, but it gets you faster to 60, 70% of the way there than anything else you could do. And then it's up to you to take the rest of the, 20, 30, 40%, whatever it is to get you over the finish line. By doing that, I've significantly decreased the number of hours that my top producers and leadership have to spend in role play with someone to teach them the very basics. I have better accountability to make them implement this stuff and to be able to say, hey, have you done it? If you haven't done it, then no, you don't get time with my top advisor. He's not going to teach you the actual words. You learn the words in the role play. When you come to the top producer and work with him or her, then it's fine tuning. It's little tweaks. Like in baseball, if you get or even in golf and so forth, like baseball, like when you have someone who's a top performer in baseball, it's not about like completely changing up your swing. It's minor tweaks here and there that make it go just that extra distance. That's what we want to get these people to. We want them to do the major changes with AI. We'll do the minor tweaks to get them over the finish line and make them more productive.
Mm, mm. So, I what I heard is if I'm going to distill this way out, is you've got a pretty solid ROI story here, in terms of the initial thoughts around cost versus like all the very significant productivity improvements, and then hopefully, you end up with a more capable advisor team, and
Yeah.
that hits the bottom line, or top line, I should say, like nothing else.
Yeah,
Yeah, fantastic.
absolutely.
Okay, one last prepared question, and this is one that I ask sort of for the benefit of the audience. Um, so if someone's listening today that's perhaps maybe still on the fence about whether, this kind of approach makes sense for their team, they're thinking about AI role play as a possibility. Um, what would you want to leave them with in terms of your thoughts? What would you want them to walk away thinking about?
I think again, the cost, the outlay, looking at that, uh, we all have two resources that are our most valuable resources, and that's our time and our energy. Steve Jobs, there's a great quote from him, something like, I'm more proud about the things that I said no to than the things I said yes to, because had I not said no to all these other things, I would never have had the chance to say yes. So the question is if someone's on here and I ask like, what's my unique value proposition that I bring to the firm? I report directly to the CEO. Should I be spending my time with a brand new financial rep coaching him?
Hmm.
That's not going to have as great of an impact on the company as some of these other things. And so you have to say no to something. As much as I might like role playing with people and practicing it, it's kind of fun. I enjoy it. That's not where I bring the most value to the company. You've got to look at how can I bring more value, like for all of us, like how can I bring more value to the company and buy this widget that's, cost me $1,000 a day, but it's spitting out the 1,500. That's a good thing for the company. And it gives me more time on my calendar, that's that resource that I have limited time and energy. And so now that I have more time on my calendar, I can be more intentional in other areas.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, no, really appreciate that, Rich. Okay. It's time to transition into audience Q&A. We've
Sure.
definitely got some questions that have come in that look pretty interesting. Um, okay, here is one of the questions. Um, so knowing what you know now, is there anything you'd change about how you rolled this out? Anything about sequencing, who you started with, how you framed it for the team, really anything.
Um, I don't know how much I would change. I shared with you already the lessons that we learned of don't give it all to them at once. I
Hmm.
have I do feel like you want to start small. And there's this concept. I lived in Montana for a few years, and on the ranches they have a bell cow. And the bell cow is the cow that has the bell. And when it's time to come in, that cow starts coming in and everybody else follows it. All the other cows follow it. You need to find the bell cows in your company. So you want it to be successful. You need to find the people that are willing to do that. Usually, your top, at least for us, our top producers are not the ones, they're bell cows in many ways, but they're not going to be the ones who participate in the pilot. It's going to be someone who's still performing at a high level that people want to mimic and follow, but they're not quite up there where they're so busy and they don't have time for this. And the brand new guy and gal, um, you got to be a little more careful with that because they don't know what they're doing and they're not bringing as much value to it. They're not ready for it. So we've made some adjustments where we don't give this to people in their first couple months. We started thinking that, hey, let's give it to them in the first, weeks and so forth. They've got too much on their plate to figure out. It's too hard. And so we've moved it to like, okay, once they get contracted with us and so forth, then we start making it available to them.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. The right point in their ramp is critical, right? And
Yeah.
that's something that every organization is going to have different thoughts about and different requirements surrounding that. All right, got another question, sort of related to the prior one, sort of a little bit. It says there are many ways a sales conversation can go. How did you educate the AI on real world questions and responses? And I know you probably worked with our team in your setup, but just
Yeah.
curious about, what you can speak to on that to make the AI interaction like relevant to your business and your scenarios.
Yeah, that's a part, again, it's the who, not how. Like, I don't know the di dirty details behind the scenes. That was one of the things that was really cool about working with you guys. Yes, we came to the table and we were able to say, hey, look, here's our script. Here's common questions or objections and how we handle them and so forth. And you guys were able to take that. Another really cool thing that was in the system that was there with Quantified was that they were able to level it up. So we had our first ones making it pretty easy, and then in our pilot we did another one like, well, let's level it up, make it a little more difficult. And the reps were like, it was too hard. Like the person, it was too hard for me to convert them over. I'm like, oh, that's good, but you want it to be hard in role play so that when it gets into the real world, if you do have harder stuff, it seems easier to handle. But yeah, we found that balance. It was good.
Excellent. Another question. You mentioned, in your storytelling during some of our Q&A that there was like one advisor who went from kind of openly resistant, maybe around that research story, right?
Mhm.
And then sort of became more of a vocal advocate, right? After a session. Was that an outlier, or did you see that pattern repeat anywhere else across the team? Were there any more like pockets of resistance to overcome?
No, we saw that in lots of areas where they just different things that they're a little more resistant. That's probably the best one. And there were several reps that we had that jumped on board and said, yeah, and they weren't doing their market research. They're like, because they're looking at it and they were understanding it as like, oh, well, this is just a bait and switch. I'm going to have a conversation with them and then I'm going to go and try to, sell them. I'm like, no, like you're missing it completely. This is not bait and switch. You're not calling these people to sell. You're calling these people to find out how to build your marketing plan. And once
Hmm.
they actually role played it and were able to see it and taste it and touch it and in the role play, much better response.
Yep. Yep. Excellent. Okay, I think I'm kind of looking at the clock here. I think we probably have time for about two more roughly questions. Let's see how quickly we get through them. I've got a two-part question here for you.
Hmm.
First part, and I'll ask it again if in answering you forget the second part, but here's the
Yeah.
first part. Do you use AI role plays to practice certain scenarios in particular, i.e., securing a meeting over the phone or objection handling? And then part two of the question is, does AI score the role plays? And if so, how to use that scoring internally?
Yeah, that's a good question. And the answer is yes, we have different scenarios and so forth. I can't remember exactly how many different role play scenarios we have. I think it's like, I don't know, seven, eight, nine, 10 of them. Our plan is it's just like we're doing the same thing. We're iterations, we're expanding on it. We have other more advanced role plays that we're wanting to implement and so forth as we continue to grow with this. So we do have those scenarios in there. And the system's really cool how it's able to do all of it. Like, and objection handling is a fantastic one where it basically gives you feedback and said, you didn't use good enough softening statements and you're a little bit too aggressive and whatever. You didn't connect with the person well enough at the beginning. And that took us some time to learn from and stuff like that, but it was great. And the AI does score that. And we use that then in the conversations, in the accountability conversations. We have a development team that is in charge of having a bi-weekly conversation with these financial reps to make sure they're reviewing that. They're reviewing a lot of other things too, but that's one of the things that comes up in that conversation.
Yeah, actually, perfect segue to another quick one here. You mentioned accountability. What is your accountability model like, and how do you hold people accountable to completing the role play?
What we developed a proprietary system that has all of them. We haven't implemented single sign-on to make that work with your system yet and so forth with the system yet. But for right now, it's like it basically says go here and go to quantified login and do it there. That's how we're doing it there. And then when they finish it, they mark it with a checkbox. But I would say if for someone who hasn't developed a system like that, I mean, my system started off very basically with an Excel spreadsheet. And I just used some basic formulas and I said, hey, here's their start date. And this should be done 2 day start date plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. And we just added that in there. And then you just create a list of here's your checklist of items you're supposed to be getting done every day. That comes from my experience with special needs kids and stuff like that, where people need to be primed and they need to understand what the expectations are. That gives them the expectations of what they're supposed to do. And then from there, if you've got the Microsoft suite, you could do it there. But the quantified system, and the only reason we didn't use it with them, the quantified system does have, Wayne or Jewel or someone correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys have the ability to kind of dish those things out with your own system and give it to them, like give them the checklist. So we're not using it that way, but that's because we have our own system that we've completely developed ourselves, and I don't want them jumping back and forth. But you could just have them log into your system, I think, and just do it there, right?
Correct, correct.
Okay, so that's
I think this person is curious about, some people are more disciplined than others in following the rules.
oh yeah,
You're giving them the plan, you're checking, whether or not people are doing it. But is there any kind of, I don't know, you can either incentivize people or chide them, the
yeah,
use the whip or the carrot.
yeah.
Just curious about anything that you've done internally to make sure that like people are actually doing this, that they're following the rules. Again, every culture is different in this regard.
So yeah, and the funny thing is that the whip or the carrot, it depends on the person which one works more, right? And that's just human natures, right? So everybody is motivated different ways. We obviously we don't use a whip. We just use a wet noodle. That's my joke for the day. Bad joke, dad joke. No, but that's the accountability call that we have with them, where they jump on the call and say, "Hey, how's this going?" And is it moving forward? And for us, this is something really important for us. Is like we like to find out what people's goals and dreams are and what they're trying to accomplish in life. Because if I say to you or an FR says to me, "Hey, I want to get a new car. I want a BMW or whatever the car is, okay? I want to get this car." And then the behavior isn't matching what's going to get them to that goal, whatever it might be. It's a conversation about the behavior. Like we need to modify this behavior unless you don't want that goal anymore. No, 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 I still want it. Okay, then let's work on this to get you to where you are. So you've got to tie activity to what their goals are in life, and whether that's monetary with bonuses and things of that nature, or whatever it is, tie it to that. Then we also, what we do is that, and this is one that we've done. It hasn't been organized as well as we'd like, but our new system gamifies everything and they earn points for completing things. And then where we're our next stage, and we haven't implemented this one yet, but where our roadmap is that then it's as you earn the points, those points go towards being able to get nice WestPac swag. So, a Travis Matthews polo shirt that has the WestPac logo on there. The company benefits from you wearing that out in the community. You benefit by having a nice Travis Matthews shirt, and we're moving towards that. That's one of our next iterations of implementation.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rich. One last question, and then we'll hand it back to Vanessa after you answer. Perhaps some advice for the room, for the audience. So if someone is listening today that is managing a team of, say, 100, 500,000 people and still relying mostly on kind of live person to person role play, or single person to group role play and workshops, what's the one thing that you would want them to know about kind of the future of where this is going?
You're crazy. Like, um, folks, I look at this. So many people are hesitant about AI, and it blows my mind. That is, I look at the experience that in California, I'm in California with the gold rush. The people who made all the money in the gold rush were not the people searching for gold. It was the people providing the tools to search for gold, right? And then I also look at the Industrial Revolution. People were losing their minds, having lived up in Montana and been around ranches and farms and so forth. People were losing their minds during the Industrial Revolution when they started coming out with this machinery that suddenly you had this machine that would go out into the fields and do this one machine would do the work of 10 or 20 or whatever the number is. Like it's going to do it. And people lost their minds thinking this is awful. We all know we have, hindsight's 2020. We all know that that was a fantastic, wonderful thing for our country and the community and for all of us. And so I feel like it's the same thing here where people are hesitant to use the AI because they're like, oh, I need the personal touch. That's like me saying, well, I need to go walk down every single row and put the seed in there perfectly every single time because it's going to grow better. It might grow better. It's going to take a lot longer. You're going to go out of business because you're walking and doing every single seed one at a time. You have to find a way to adapt and implement these things. And then the beautiful thing for me is that AI is a fantastic uh, assistant or servant. It is a horrific boss or manager or whatever else you want to use for like you can't let AI think for you, but you can use it to help you to get 40, 50, 60% of the way where you need to be or where you want to go. You should be using these tools, thinking that the more people you have, the more you need it. If you've got 5 people, if you're planting a row of just 5 seeds, my daughters are planting some seeds right now in the backyard. Yeah, we're doing that by hand. They're little seedlings. They've got this little square thing they're putting together. Dude, that's easy. If you've got a farm and you've got I'd say probably, and I don't know what the real number is. Maybe it's like once you get past like 20, 50, 30, I don't know, people, you should probably be looking at doing AI. You should probably be looking at using a tool like this because just the return on the investment of time and your time and the other team members' time, it's tremendous. Takes a little bit of work to get it up and running, but it's fantastic in the long run.
Rich, thank you so much for all of your perspective and your experiences. I hope it's been helpful to the audience today. Really appreciate your time taking away from your day job at Westpac. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. Bye bye.
Bye.